Ian Carroll, for those of you who know, sat down with Tucker Carlson and they discussed the importance of not letting the Charlie Kirk assassination go. And I agree, it is not a story that should be let go. And here is what happened during their conversation the other night.
Story that's been covered up, any story that you suspect foul play in the reporting or in the mainstream kind of narrative, the first thing you have to do is hone in on what are the documented primary source facts that we can read and understand and see and hear. And so then I just started sifting through and I started watching body cams and I started listening to 911 calls and I started repiecing it together for myself because I found there's a number of really great reporters that I'll credit throughout here, like John Cullen and Jason Goodman and Mindy Robinson and yourself. You did some on it too. Alex Jones did some on it.
I got nothing, but it didn't smell right.
Well, you at least spoke up. You at least were someone that was in that mainstream media space that was not buying it because it was just, it stank. And so there's all these people that have made media that synthesizes it and made media that speculates and takes it much, much further, especially into the Saudi angle that we'll talk about. But for me, I was like, I need to start with understanding the information and see if I can arrive at a similar factual understanding of, like, when I look at the original evidence without these narratives on it, do I arrive at a similar conclusion? And immediately it only takes you like 5 clicks on random pieces of evidence on that map to realize that it's clearly not a lone gunman in the Mandalay Bay.
From the very moment that this story was a global phenomenon on September 10th of last year, I suspected right away that something was wrong when the first person who gave his eulogy of Charlie Kirk was Netanyahu Milikowski. Much like Netanyahu Milikowski, and again, the whole thing about our conversations coming full circle for the evening, Netanyahu Milikowski being the first person of prominence to laud the Donald for his actions in Venezuela, they give away the game every single time. And as we've pointed out, and as we've covered with Candace, with Ian, with Tucker Carlson, and this is the other thing about Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes says that Israel had nothing to do with Charlie's assassination. Really? Because all the evidence kind of suggests that Israel really did not want him involved in anything in politics anymore after his decision to not accept their money. He was taking it for a long time, but I guess he got his mind right the right way. And they decided we can't have that. So what did they do? They had a public execution. They made an example of him. And that's why now you're seeing very few people speak out the way they should, and many people speak in the way of totalitarian understanding. They had to do it publicly. They had to make an example, and there are many reasons for this. Charlie wanted to open up the books and have a better understanding of how the money was being spent and where it was coming from. And the people that were running a grift the whole time did not want any of that coming out. And why would they? It is a grift. Turning Point USA is one of the most impressive grifts ever. And as I said, I've gone to their events. I see what they're doing. And you think that's cheap? No, it's not cheap at all. Very expensive. And they do events all the time. And why do they do it? Well, for a number of reasons. To elect pro-Israel conservatives into power. And the second that crystallized, the great awakening, the great noticing was happening. And that's what Charlie decided, as was indicated in text messages that Candace Owens revealed, that he understood that he might be martyred. And he accepted that reality. And then he was dead. Despite what some people say, I'm pretty sure he's dead. Jeffrey Epstein, that's another story. But Ian's got more to say.
Because how would I have this massive cluster of 911 calls coming from the Bellagio, which is like, I don't know, like half a mile to a mile up the strip. It's like a giant block and a half. If you've ever been to Vegas, Vegas is a crazy place of gigantic monolithic buildings of sin that it stretches on and on and on. And the Bellagio is way up on the northern end of the strip, and the Mandalay Bay is the southernmost building. And most of these calls come in an hour and more after Paddock has allegedly killed himself. And we're talking like people that work there. We're talking security guards. We're talking victims, people alleging that they've seen the shooter, describing the shooter, and it happens in multiple waves. And then a lot of them are clustered around, for example, those 9 body cams that capture audio of multiple bursts of automatic fire while we're getting 911 calls from the Bellagio saying that there's active shooters at the Bellagio, while the police dispatcher is saying we've got a shooter at the Bellagio. So when you dig into this primary source evidence, you very quickly realize that this is not just Paddock. It's not a lone gunman. And so once I familiarized myself with that, then I expanded out to like, okay, so then what did the people that did all this work, what did they conclude?
I like Ian. He's a curious guy. He's a Chad, if you will. Handsome fella, very tall, about 6'5", I think he said he was. And he has collaborated with Candace a number of times. He's collaborating with Tucker now, and he's done a good job. Some of it clearly is a grift, if you want to call it that, and it's a career, and he's making money, yes. But you know what? He's on the right side of a lot of issues. Like, a lot. And in the case of the Vegas shooting, one thing that I always thought made no sense whatsoever when it happened, does everybody understand how strict these casinos are when it comes to metal detectors and firearms, even crossing a line into any of these facilities? The idea that he got an arsenal into that hotel room at Mandalay Bay still doesn't make any sense. You can kind of throw a lot of that other stuff out the window. But that one issue, at the moment it happened, I thought, how? I've been to Vegas quite a few times. And mostly for business, just want to put that out there. How could he have possibly gotten in there? How? There are always these excuses. But it just seems pretty obvious to me that the only reason why we haven't fallen under complete totalitarian control in this nation is because so many people are armed. And I do believe that there are active efforts always made to try to take guns away. And we know why. Think about how this country would be right now if that were not the case. And I'm not a gun enthusiast by any stretch. I support the Second Amendment, sure. But I'm also, I observe. And what I'm observing is a ruling class that desperately wants us to get under their thumb and never be let go. We can't let that happen.
Was their understanding of this evidence, and where did they take a possible explanation? And that's where it gets really interesting. And we don't know for sure, but I think there's actually a pretty solid lead. And whatever it is, it's still at play in the modern information space. Because anytime you have one of these shootings or, false flag events or anything that gets covered up on this scale, right? If you buy the mainstream narrative, all bets are off. There's no facts there. There's no understanding of reality there. If you buy the mainstream narrative about 9/11, you have no level of understanding of even how many buildings fell or why they fell, like let alone who could have, brought these towers down the way they came down, who could have, guarded these hijackers the way that they were guarded all the way there, funded it, etc. But once you realize that the mainstream narrative on one of these events is for sure not the whole story, then you actually open up to a whole world of almost any explanation is possible.
On that note, Ian is 1,000% correct. When the corporate mainstream narrative is revealed, believe the opposite. You know, like when Kash Patel said, "See you in Valhalla," covered up the crime scene. That, again, covered up the crime scene. Nothing to see here. No forensic evidence regarding Charlie's assassination. The most logical conclusion that I've come to when it came to his assassination was some type of an explosive device in his lapel and it blew up in his neck. That to me is the one that makes the most sense. I'm not convinced it was a gunshot. But I also believe that there were many people involved and many distractions that took place at that time. And there were obviously several plants in that audience. We know that. So where do we go now? What do we do now? Whenever they're giving you a narrative, like why the hell are we in Venezuela? Why is Charlie dead? Why are these billionaires allowed to control us with no resistance? Thank you, Defo. And I'm willing to believe that, sure. It goes without saying. And anyone who's been watching this channel since we've taken off last spring, I didn't support Charlie Kirk. Neither does Jen. In fact, not long before Charlie was assassinated, he decided to highlight me and about 4 or 5 other content creators as like the main people in populist left politics to be on the lookout for. I welcome Charlie's challenge, if you will. But I also respect the fact that Charlie never ran from a challenge, never avoided conversation or dialogue. And I always thought that that was very telling in terms of his overall character. One that I didn't agree with when it came to his theocratic views, but I certainly can appreciate somebody who was willing to let other voices be heard. And that is not something that is common in politics today, and we all know that.